Welcome to Healey's Cornish cider farm, ladies and gentlemen. As we go around on our trip today, I'll tell you a little bit about what goes on here on the farm and in our orchard, and also a bit of the history of cider making itself. Before I do that, I invite you to answer the cider farm riddle. How do we get a fully grown apple into a bottle? You'll find out the answer soon enough. Cider was first made here approximately 100 to 150 years ago. But the farmers in those days were making cider for their own enjoyment and to pay the wages of the men who worked for them in the field. The average farm labourer would consume approximately 4 to 5 pints of cider a day. During the summer harvest time, very likely drinking double that amount, 9 to 10 pints. So you can understand why it was well known that the farmer that produced the best cider also got the best workers. Coming into view now on your left-hand side, you can see the original orchards here at the farm. Some of these trees here in this orchard are over 100 years old and are still bearing fruit today. Although we no longer harvest from them, but keep them as part of our heritage. What is interesting to note is the way that they are planted. Basically just randomly, approximately 40 trees to an acre. Today in our modern orchards, we've got over 200 trees to the acre. On our right-hand side now, the tall trees that we are passing make a very effective windbreak for us, protecting us from the prevailing southwesterly winds that we get here in Cornwall. They're home to a wide variety of wildlife, and we regularly see squirrels and woodpeckers among the trees. We've even got a family of buzzards. Behind these old trees, you can see our museum orchard, growing old Cornish varieties such as Cornish mothers, kind briard, and most notably the rattler. This is where we gained inspiration for the name of our famous cider, Cornish rattler, which you may have seen in the pubs and shops around Cornwall. We're now entering the largest of our two orchards on the farm. We've got a total of 3,000 apple trees and grow many varieties of apples. You can learn all about the life cycle of an apple in our visitor centre exhibition. Our production halls are capable of making 52 million bottles a year. That's quite a few pints of cider or glasses of wine by my reckoning. There are 3 main things we're looking for in our apples: acidity, tannin, and sugar. The acidity for the apple flavour and the bite. The sugar is eaten by the yeast, producing alcohol. And thirdly, the tannin, for its rich colour, flavour, and natural preservatives. You might be surprised to learn we don't pick any apples here, we let nature do the job for us, which is the traditional way of harvesting apples for cider. We simply shake the trees to help nature along. We go through the orchards twice. The first time to collect the windfalls, and secondly shaking the trees, collecting the remaining fruit from the ground. Unlike the eating apple orchards you see around the country today, their trees are low and round in shape. This is to enable them to be easily hand-picked, so the fruit is picked without bruising. With our trees, we allow them to grow upwards. We leave the centre in the tree and grow what is known as a central lever. We stop them when they get to about 20 feet in height. The only thing that governs the height is the height of the shortest person doing the pruning. We do all of our pruning in January and February. And what we aim for when we prune is to try and get an A shape into the tree. This is to allow light and air to get around the fruit and help it ripen. As we go through, the answer to the cider farm riddle lies in the branches of the tree. It is impossible to get a full-grown apple to the next one without damage. So what we do is poke the bud through the neck until it's small enough to fit. Then simply let it grow naturally inside the bud until they're ready to be picked, filled with ground. Both the orchards here are on the side of a valley, and this site is chosen for three main reasons. One being they face north and south, so that means they get maximum sunlight on their fruit. Secondly, we have no means of watering the trees, so we have to rely on the odd 1 or 2 days of rain we get here in Cornwall each year. It works its way down the sides of the valley, slowly watering the trees for them. And as I said before, you have 4 trees that make a windbreak. On our left-hand side now, the tall trees have been planted again as a windbreak on the far side of the orchard. On the right-hand side, we have our Healey apple tree, planted in 2007 and used for our delicious single variety. Amongst the trees are what we call pollinators, which we use as they start to blossom earlier than the Healey variety, which in turn gets the bees active and ready for when the Healey trees come. Cornwall was famous for its mines, but unfortunately the last working mine closed down in the 90s. It was not just tin that was mined here in Cornwall. Large quantities of copper, arsenic and lead were also mined. The mine behind us here was in fact a lead and arsenic mine. And you might be surprised to know that they had one of the largest ever seams of silver ever found in Cornwall, making it one of the wealthiest mines. People talk about the good old days, but you think about the miners who worked in the mines. They had to walk to work. Once they got to work, they had to climb down the steep vertical ladders to get to the bottom of the shaft, as there were no winding engines in those days. And once there, once again they had to walk underground, anything up to a mile in the dark. Wet conditions just lit by the light of a tallow candle. And once they got to the end, they had to start work. And it was only once they... A good example is on our shop and marrow pits. marrow being mixed with lime for rendering the walls. And it's not just cider that we make from the fruits of the orchards and local land. We also have our own distillery over in the courtyard where we make cider brandies and the very first Cornish whiskey. The barley was grown in the Scar, brewed in the mash at St Austell Brewery, then sent over to us, where we distill the mash into a spirit and then mature it in our cellars. And as they say, good things come to those who wait. We age our cider brandies between 3 and 10 years, and we leave our whiskey in our cellars for a minimum of 8 years. Well, I do hope you all enjoyed your trip with us today. And don't forget, when we get back to the farm, if you haven't already done so, please visit our shop and have a taste or two of some of our